So once the black people was enslaved, that's who you had left. You had Arabs, you had Greeks. So you had Jews and Greeks that was inside of Israel. So when you look at the people of Israel today, look at them. Take a look. Who do they look like? You can't barely tell who's Greek and who is a Jew. So look at these people. Look at this. Look at these people here. Which are they? Are these Jews or are these Greeks? These are Greek people with the Australian Prime Minister. Look at these people here. You can't tell. Are these people Jews or are they Greeks? These people are Greeks. Look at these people. Who are they? Jews or Greeks? They're Jews. It's hard for you to even tell. We can see what clearly happened in Israel. We can see the change that occurred. So you have there today a mix of basically Arab Jews and Greek Jews and Greek people. That's who are in. Those are the people who are in Israel today. Look at the flag of Israel. Look at it. Now look at the Greek flag. They're the same colors, the blue and white. Same color flag. These are the same people. They just mixed together and they've been in Israel ever since. So now when we look at history, we can see what really happened. We can see how the Arabs took over Egypt and how they are in Egypt still to this day. We can see why the people in Israel, we can see why they look the way they look. Some of them look like white people, some of them look like Arabs. Some of them look like a mix between white people and Arabs. A lot of people couldn't really tell, which is why we get these Jews who look like this today, because we know the Greeks was there. These people are of Greek descent. They're Greeks. That's who they are. They are not the true Hebrews. So when the Hebrews say that, well, the original Hebrews was black, well, yeah, of course they was, because their whole region was black at some point. But understand that when you say they black, now you know the history of how they became Hebrews. So when you're talking about the Jews coming in and spreading Judaism, a lot of these people was black in the beginning. In the beginning, they was black people. They was Africans. They was the descendants of the ancient Egyptians spreading Judaism. So when they was coming into Africa, which is why people say, well, you got the Igbo or the Ibu tribes in Africa who are Hebrews. Well, yeah, because you had black people coming and spreading that whole doctrine inside Africa. But this was way after the conquest, way after indoctrination. We ain't talking about BCE. We talking about AD. So you can't say that these people are ancient. You know, they're from the original tribes or from the original Hebrews, because there's no such thing. These people didn't even start out becoming a people until the Greeks took over Egypt and made up the whole doctrine. And this is what history is showing us. So this is why these Hebrews tell you that, oh no, the black Hebrews in Israel, they left Israel and went into Africa. They don't want to mention this whole conquest of the Arabs. They don't want to bring up the whole Arab conquest. They want to make it like they escaped the Arabs and escaped the Arab slave trade and somehow made it into West Africa, when that's bullcrap. They want to avoid it because it don't make no sense, because the Bible don't mention it. The Bible don't talk about it, so they try to avoid it altogether and say that, well, they left Israel, they went into Africa, got into West Africa, and they want you to believe they somehow never intermarried or never mingled with the people, the Africans in West Africa, and that somehow once the slave trade came along, the transatlantic slave trade, that these Africans in West Africa was somehow able to point out these black Hebrews and say, well, he's a Hebrew, she's a Hebrew, they Hebrews, take them, we'll sell them to you. It don't make no sense for these people to be in Africa for hundreds of years and never intermarry, interbreed with the people in Africa. That's bullcrap. Now understand, we don't have pictures, actual pictures of the original slaves. We don't have pictures of these original slaves before they came to America. But you will have to believe, if you're going to believe these Hebrew Israelites, you will have to believe, one, that every single black Hebrew that was in Israel was able to escape the sub-Saharan slave trade, the whole Islamic slave trade for over 800 years. You would have to believe that. You would have to believe that they all was able to dodge slavery for 800 years by the Arabs and made it into Africa safely until somehow the people in Africa was able to point them out. I mean, look at the slaves from back then. Look at them. I mean, look at those slaves from back then and then look at the people in Africa. It's very hard for you to tell that these people are not Africans. So tell me, how the hell these other Africans going to point to these people right here and say, you a Hebrew, you a Hebrew, you a Hebrew, take them. It's bullshit. They insulting your intelligence for you if they want you to believe this. They're insulting you. To me, it's an insult. It's an insult for you to believe this stuff. For you to say this stuff to me is telling me that you think I'm stupid. Seriously. This is crazy. This is madness. When you look at history, history doesn't support this at all, which is why they run to that Bible. So now, let's get into the whole Crusades, because the Crusades is a big part of this. And this whole thing is coming to an end because there's not much it's going to take to crush the rest of this Hebrew doctrine once you understand history. So now understand, the whole Crusades was basically about a couple things. It was about, one, taking back the territories and the lands that was controlled by the Arab conquest and territories that was taken over by Muslim conquest. The other thing was to get rid of and silence all of the naysayers of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, another thing is this. The term or the name Catholic was not made up by the Romans. The term and the name of Catholic already existed under the Greeks. It means whole or universal. Now, the thing was, the Roman Catholic Church used the name Catholic to basically separate themselves from other churches, because a lot of churches started to come up against the Roman Catholic Church because, you know, they had a pope and they was trying to make themselves to be the leader of the whole thing, and a lot of people wasn't with it. So the Crusades was really about them going in there and wiping out a lot of these Christian churches. And as I said before, this is when they're talking about the Catholics killing Christians, because that's what it was about, the Crusades. They didn't want to recognize the Pope as being the authority over Christianity, so they was wiping out a lot of these churches and peoples. That's what the Crusades was about. Now understand, Catholic is one of the basically 4 terms or 4 marks used by the church that was specified in the Council of Nicaea, the whole Nicene Creed. They specified 4 marks that basically make you like a true Christian or a true Catholic. And being Catholic or whole or universal was one of those terms. But the main thing was for them to go back and take over those lands. So now, this is where the whole thing with the English comes into place, because during the Crusades, they conquered into a lot of Europe and they started taking over a lot of these territories. So understand, even though England had a king and everything, a lot of these kings and these monarchies answered to the Pope. They answered to Rome for a long time. So understand, when the Crusades happened, a lot of people separated themselves from Roman Catholicism. A lot of people did not like Rome. They didn't like what they was doing because, of course, the word was spreading around that the Crusaders was coming and destroying a whole bunch of churches because these people would not agree with Rome. So the Great Schism happened in the 11th century during the Crusades. Now, the Great Schism was basically where you get the separation of Christianity and Catholicism, because they basically couldn't agree. They couldn't agree on the source of the Holy Spirit, and they definitely couldn't agree on the Pope having universal jurisdiction over the whole religion. They couldn't agree on it. So this is where the separation occurred. So now this is going to bring me into the whole King James part of it. I don't have nothing to say about him being, you know, bisexual or homosexual or anything like that, because he had 2 kids. So he probably was bisexual, but that's besides the point. The whole thing is this. It really begins with the whole Protestant Reformation. That's when this whole thing really starts, and what led to the creation of the King James Version. Now, the Protestant Reformation began in 1517 somewhere in Germany. Now, the Protestants basically wanted to get rid of any remnants of Roman Catholicism inside of certain churches. So now understand that Rome ruled Great Britain from 43 AD to 410 AD. But after the whole thing was over, they still had control over the Church of Great Britain for a while. Now, when King Henry VIII came along and assumed the throne, he couldn't get a male heir from his wife. So he wanted a divorce. He wanted Pope Clement to get him a divorce from his wife because she couldn't provide him with a son. They had a daughter. So now when Pope Clement didn't grant him his divorce, he passed 2 laws. The first one was in 1532 with the submission of the clergy. Now, the submission of the clergy basically said that they could not change any laws or make any rules without permission from the king. Then in 1534, the Act of Supremacy was passed, which basically said that they would take all the taxes that they were sending to Rome and make those taxes from the church payable to the crown. And also, nobody could basically ask Rome for anything, whether it had to do with religion or otherwise. It was forbidden. So you couldn't even talk to Rome and say anything to Rome. Nobody from the Church of Great Britain could talk to Rome under these new laws. So once these things was passed, the Protestant Reformation got in there and was saying, you know what, we need to get rid of any remnants of Rome. So in 1539, King Henry VIII gave us the Great Bible. Now it was prepared by some Protestant scholars from England. Now some of these same Protestant scholars from England later went to Geneva, Switzerland, and they created the Geneva Bible in 1560. Now remember, the Geneva Bible was the one that had the annotations. They had the writings that was on the side, basically the commentary that was talking about the Bible. And the Geneva Bible is also the Bible that named the Pope as the Antichrist. So now a lot of the ruling elite in England, who was under Queen Elizabeth I, they didn't like the annotations in the Geneva Bible. A lot of people didn't like the Geneva Bible because they said it was being too honest. It was giving away too much. So in 1568, Queen Elizabeth I gave us the Bishop's Bible. It was revised in 1572. So then in 1604 is when King James convened the Hampton Court Conference, because the Puritans had a problem with Queen Elizabeth's Bible. A lot of people was concerned with the translation from the Hebrew. A lot of people didn't believe it was a good translation. They didn't believe that the Great Bible by King Henry VIII was a good translation of the Hebrew. So understand what's taking place here. You basically had, once the Crusades started, you had Rome going out and wiping out the churches who was not accepting the Pope as having universal jurisdiction over the Bible, over Catholicism, over Christianity. Wiping these people out who didn't accept certain terminologies that, or certain rituals that the Catholic Church was using and things they was doing. You know, where the Holy Spirit comes from, the whole divinity of Jesus. So many different things they disagreed upon, which caused the great schism and that big divide. So now when you go to King James, you look at how the King James Version came into place, it had nothing to do with somebody laying hands on King James and, you know, King James being filled with the Spirit or being an Israelite or anything like that. It had everything to do with them trying to separate from Rome. This is what the Protestants was doing. This is what the Puritans was doing. It was going out and trying to eradicate any traces of Roman Catholicism from churches. Because you can't sit up there and say, I'm a man of God and God this and that and Jesus this, and you're going out and you're killing Christians. You can't do that. So a lot of people didn't accept Rome. So understand, the whole thing with the King James Version was to separate themselves from Rome. So in doing that, they obviously changed the doctrine. So we know that in Catholicism, they have to do the canonical books. They have Maccabees. They have all those 7 books that the King James Version do not have. They left them out, saying that they were never written in Hebrew and it was only written in Greek, so they shouldn't be a part of the Bible, which is why the deuterocanonical books are not in the King James Version, but are in the Catholic books and in the old books. So now their whole thing was these things was never written in Hebrew. They wasn't written in Aramaic. And of course, back then they could not know. So what the Hebrews will tell you is God put a spirit on King James and on the translators to get a perfect translation of the Bible, and that they used the Masoretic text, or they used Textus Rescriptus, or they used some kind of Hebrew codex or manuscript so they would get the translation correct. They didn't use what the Romans was using. Now the thing is, they always say that, you know, the King James Version is just like the Dead Sea Scrolls. But guess what? The King James Version does not contain the Deuterocanonicals. It doesn't have it in it. It doesn't have Maccabees. But the Dead Sea Scrolls does. The Dead Sea Scrolls has the Deuterocanonicals. It has Maccabees. It does not have a book of Esther. So how could the King James Version be like the Dead Sea Scrolls when the Dead Sea Scrolls have those books and the King James Version does not? You would think, not having those 7 books in there, including the prophecies of Daniel, the extra prophecies, those extra books that was in Daniel and some other books, you would think that would dramatically change the Bible, and it obviously has. So the whole thing is, what was going on was the people, when they was writing these Bibles, look at all the people who wrote Bibles after the Crusades. You remember, Rome was basically taking over Christianity everywhere. They were saying, you know, you can't translate it from Latin. You can't do this. You can't write it in English. Remember, John Wycliffe, John Huss. Remember all the people who was killed for translating Bibles, burnt at the stake for what they was doing. This was Rome doing this. They didn't want nobody to change anything. But you had England, you had other places who was changing these Bibles. They was taking out things that they didn't agree with Rome on, and it was changing the books. So it's not like what Rome had. But this is the thing that people are not remembering. Where did all this stuff come from? It came from Rome. So if you change anything that they did, you are changing what is close to the original. So think about it. Where did this thing start? It started with the Greeks and the Romans. Remember, we don't have a Hebrew version of the Septuagint. When the Septuagint was first written, it was in Greek. They say it came from a Hebrew version, but we never had that version. Just all of a sudden, we got this Greek version of the Septuagint, and we got an explanation called the Letters of Orestes. We never had no Hebrew version. Now, for over 300 years, the Jews agreed with this Greek version because they spoke Greek. It wasn't until hundreds of years later that somebody decided to translate it into Hebrew when the New Testament came out, and they didn't want to deal with that New Testament in Greek. They wanted a Hebrew Old Testament. So we had the Masoretes begin to start writing the Septuagint in Hebrew. This is when it started. This is when this whole thing started. But we don't have that Septuagint. We don't have none of that. So as far as we know, the only books we have are in Greek or Latin with the codices and the Latin Vulgate. So any book that happened after that, we talk about, you can't have a King James Version. John Wycliffe and John Huss and King Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth, all these people could not write Bibles if it was not for these codices and the books that preceded them that came from Rome. So of course, when you talk about the Bible, the King James Version using the Masoretic text, well, where did the Masoretic text get its writings from? They had to use something. They didn't just come up out of nowhere and just write a Bible. They had to get the idea from something or copy it from something. So they obviously got it from the codices. They got it from the Latin Vulgate. So they basically took the Septuagint Greek and basically read it and translated it into Hebrew. So it's basically saying what the Septuagint said, and they changed and took out whatever they disagreed with. This is what happened. So none of it is close to the original, but it don't matter anyway because it's all bullshit. So we can kill all that nonsense about a black man creating the Bible. We can kill all that. Because we know when you start doing the research does not support it. This is why King James has to be a black man. This is why they have to tell you this. Because they know when you go back and start doing the history, you can't deny Rome's involvement with the Bible. You can't deny the Greeks' involvement with the Old Testament. You can't deny it. It's there, period. All of a sudden, we have this Greek Septuagint out of nowhere. We have this Greek Septuagint. Now, we know, of course, the ancient Greeks were black. But we ain't talking about those Greeks. We know Alexander the Greek was white, period. We know this happened under the rule of the Ptolemies, because this is where the whole Letters of Orestes fraud happens at. So it goes back to these white Greeks, period. And we know the Romans was white. So we can kill the whole noise about the Bible being created by black men. So let's kill that. Now, let's get into this Deuteronomy 28:68. Because as I said, it is not the same. When you go back to the original, to the oldest versions of the Bible, it don't say nothing about no Egypt or no ships. So understand, we do not have an ancient copy of Deuteronomy. I'm talking about before 500 AD, written in Hebrew. It don't exist. We don't have a complete copy. The oldest complete copy of Deuteronomy that we have is in Codex Sinaiticus. Now, remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls, take a look at them. This is Deuteronomy in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's pieces. This is what they give you because they know it don't say anything like the King James Version, and it doesn't even say the same thing that the codices say. It says something completely different, and I'm sure of that. So we don't have an ancient copy of Deuteronomy. We don't have a BC copy of Deuteronomy that's complete. The oldest complete copy of Deuteronomy that we have is in Codex Sinaiticus. And it doesn't say anything about no ships. It doesn't say anything about no going back to Egypt on ships or slaves or anything to that effect at all. So we're going to take a look at it and see what it actually says. So now we're at the website for Codex Sinaiticus. And I want you to see right off the bat, this is all that we have. Chapter 3, 4, 28, 29, and 30. That's it. Now, this is the most complete copy of Deuteronomy that we have that dates before 500 AD. Nothing else on earth is more complete than this, period. We know the Dead Sea Scrolls is older, but it's not as complete. Codex Sinaiticus has the most complete version of the Bible. It's the most complete Bible on earth, period. So when you go back and you're trying to figure out what is as closest to the original as possible, you have to go to Codex Sinaiticus. You can't go to the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's in pieces. Now, this manuscript was actually stashed away at some point in time in Mount Sinai at a monastery, and it was found by Constantine von Tischendorf in the 1800s. So it was sitting there for hundreds of years, and it's in pretty good condition. Now, here you see a little bit of holes or whatever like that, but you can actually make these words out. You can actually make them out and see what it's saying, but they give it to you over here. So here is 68, Deuteronomy 28:68. We can see it here. Now, when we match it up with King James Version, I mean, you can eyeball it and see that it's completely different. Doesn't even start off with ka, and doesn't even say the same thing. So here it is. This is what it's saying in Sinaiticus. Completely different. Nothing about Egypt, nothing about ship or slavery or anything like that. So understand that we know, as I showed you in my last video, the scribes made mistakes. So if you try to copy and paste and do like a Google Translate, if a letter is off, you're not going to get the correct translation. You got to know or show it to somebody who actually knows, who can read Greek. And I mean, one of the things that you do is when you start reading manuscripts is you can kind of tell a difference that if a scribe was trying to say like that and spelled it than, and you can just like read it and say that, well, maybe he meant that. I know he didn't mean than. And it's just little, errors like that. So if somebody trying to say the and they spell it THO or THA, I know they probably meant THE. So when you read these manuscripts, it's saying here, definite place, there presents an enemy unto your child, and child run away and not be the inquiree. And that's basically what it's saying. Something about children. Doesn't say anything about no ships. Doesn't say anything about Egypt. Definite place, there presents an enemy unto your child, and child run away and not be the inquiree. That's what it's saying. So when people read this thing, when they read the King James Version and they look at it, they are thinking that it says the exact same thing here in Codex Sinaiticus, or in the Septuagint, or in the original Bible, and it doesn't. It's not the same. They changed it, obviously. So when you read all those passages, excuse me, from the King James Version, it's talking about slavery. The King James Version, they started in 1604, finished in 1611. Slavery was going on for hundreds of years already. Of course they knew about the iron around the neck. Of course they knew about what was happening to the slaves. They knew about the stuff already, and they wrote it in the Bible. This is what happened. So here's the proof right here. You can go through the manuscript yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go through it yourself and do the comparison. It's not the same. Now, you can't go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and do a comparison because it's not complete, because they don't want you to know what it says. But here's the proof right here. It doesn't say the same thing. So when we look at Codex Sinaiticus, we can see it's clearly different from the King James Version. Now, I should note as well, in Codex Sinaiticus, they only have Deuteronomy 28, 68, and 69. It doesn't even have the rest of Deuteronomy 28. So we can't even go in there and look at the rest of Deuteronomy 28 and see what it says. See if it's talking about, what would happen if the Hebrews obey God and disobey God. We can't even figure that out because it doesn't even say that. We don't have it. We don't have it in there. But if Deuteronomy 28, 68 is different from the King James Version, then obviously the rest of Deuteronomy is different as well. So we can at least draw that conclusion because the story wouldn't add up. You got to understand that giving you all these different versions, don't you think that when you change the Bible in any way, it's going to take away from what it originally said? So how in the world is the King James Version going to leave out the Deuterocanonicals? How is they going to leave out and change so many different things that's in the oldest manuscripts? This obviously changes the actual Bible and changes the message. This is one of the things that, scholars try to point out, but a lot of religious people don't want to accept that. Yes, you separated yourself from the Romans, but without the Romans, you get no Christianity, because they are the ones who put this thing on the forefront. The Jews didn't do it. The Jews didn't even agree with Christianity. They didn't want nothing to do with it. They want their separate way. But without the Romans, you don't get what we have today. You'll have Judaism, that's it. Well, it would have been no need for King James or anybody else to make a Bible, a New Testament, or anything like that, because we would just have Judaism if it wasn't for Rome. So when they sit there and tell you that a black man created this Bible, bull. They know for a fact you can't get around the Roman involvement in the Bible and the Greek involvement in the Bible, which is why, as I say, King James has to be black, and he had to have had a spirit put on him to give him the truth, which is why it's all different. Yeah, that sounds all well and good, but that's not what the proof is telling us. So let's get into this whole tribe of Shem thing, because I'm tired of it. So now, one of the first things that the Hebrew Israelites will say to you is that we do not come from Africa. We come from the tribe of Shem. We come from Israel. Our ancestors who were brought to America came from Israel, or came from Africa, but originally from Israel, and are of the tribe of Shem. But I have shown you we have no history of a tribe of Shem in real life. So they are saying that the Israelites come from this tribe. The Hebrews come from these people. We don't have no history of this at all. We don't have any history. But this is what they want you to believe. So now, we went over before, and I've shown you that when you read 2 Samuel, it's talking about King David going into Jebus or Jerusalem and basically conquering the Jebusites. He's there, he's talking about if he smite the deaf and the lame, I'll make somebody a chief or a captain or something like that when you read 2 Samuel chapter 5. Now, the whole thing is, this is Jerusalem, but it's telling you that Jerusalem was called something different before it was called Jerusalem. It was called Jebus. Now, we know that it was inhabited by the Jebusites, who are descendants of Ham. So we're talking about black people. We're talking about these Israelites and King David coming into Jerusalem or into Jebus and killing these black people and taking over their land, right? So according to the Hebrew Israelites, King David and these Israelites supposed to be us, supposed to be black people. So you got black on black crime, right? So you got the Israelites, supposed to be of the line of Shem, coming into Jerusalem, right? But Ezekiel 16, and I know a Hebrew who is smart is going to, cringe right now and say, oh shit, here you go with that Ezekiel 16 shit. Yeah, here I go. It says, thus say the Lord, unto Jerusalem. He didn't say unto Jebus. He didn't say unto the Jebusites. He says, thus says the Lord unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite and thy mother a Hittite. You read Genesis 10:15, it tells you the descendants of Ham, and the Amorites and the Hittites are the descendants of Ham, black people. So God is saying, Jerusalem, you come from Ham, but Jerusalem's supposed to be of Shem. It's supposed to be where the Israelites come from. So God is saying here that the Israelites come from Ham. He's basically telling you what I've been saying in this whole video, that these people were black. But let's go down here. Let's make sure we're talking about the same Israelites, the same people. So when you go read 16:8, it says, now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over thee and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee and enter into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord God, and thou becomest mine. So, did God make a covenant with the Jebusites? No. Did he make a covenant with Jebus? No. He made a covenant with the Israelites, the people of Jerusalem. So why is it saying in the beginning? Why is he saying that these people come from the line of Ham, but these Hebrew Israelites are telling you we came from Shem? What's going on here? So now let's bring this whole thing together so you can understand what is taking place and what this book is about. This Bible, especially the Old Testament, is all about the conquest of black people, period. They never mention any of the people of the tribe of Shem. They don't go into what happened to these people. We don't find them in history. We don't find them nowhere. The Bible tells you that they don't build anything. They don't build any cities. They go into lands that was built by the people of the tribe of Ham and conquer it. Just like in real life. What happened in real life? All the lands that we had, they came into and took. You talking about the people from Japheth and from Shem. But who are they really? Who are they really? We're talking about Arabs, and we're talking about the Romans and the Greeks. We're talking about white people, we're talking about Arabs. That's who Japheth and Shem represents. Period. Don't represent no black people. Black people are of Ham, if you want to go and use it biblically. But in real life, it's just justifying what they did to us. That's all it's doing. By saying that we conquered these black people and took their land, murdered them, stole their history because God said it was okay. So when we go to Deuteronomy 7 and we start reading it, it's backing up exactly what I'm saying, trying to make it biblical, saying that God said it was okay. So it says, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. This is real history right here. That's what it's talking about. That's what it's basing it off. They went in and conquered all these lands. This is a black people it's talking about. These are lands of black folks that we had the Greeks and the Romans and the Persians and the Arabs come in and take from us. They took it from us under the guise of religion, under the guise of this made up God, basically saying that it was ordained by God. This is God's will that these people be wiped out and destroyed and we take over their lands, because they never show you in the Bible the people of Shem building anything. They don't build anything. They don't have any cities. They come into cities and they conquered. Plain and simple. It's trying to take history and make it biblical and use it to justify what happened to black people. That's all it is. That they were set apart. These are God's special people, so God allowed this to happen. So when you go to Deuteronomy 7, you continue reading, it says, and when the Lord thy God shall deliver them from thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Let's go down here to 6. It says, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So these people are special. But he's talking about the people who are from the tribe of Ham. He ain't talking about no Shemitic people. He's talking about people that come from Ham, not nobody that come from Shem and Japheth. When you do the etymology, or when you trace back the genealogy, from Genesis 10:15, these people come from Ham. So when you're reading it, and it's talking about utterly destroying these people, and these people are supposed to be Israelites who destroy these people. I mean, we're talking about they destroyed their own people when you read in Deuteronomy. When it's talking about destroying the Jebusites and the Hittites and the Hivites and all these black people, we're talking about black people killing black people. This is what it's saying, because one minute God is saying in the Bible that, hey, you people from Jerusalem, you come from these people. He just said that you come from. How are you destroying yourself? Didn't he just say your birth and your nativity is of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites? But then it says in Deuteronomy 7 that, hey, y'all go and utterly destroy these people. It's the same people. Y'all destroyed yourself. What's going on here? So it's clearly trying to tell you something here. Which is why I tell you this is a parable. So now when you read in Deuteronomy and it's talking about utterly destroying these people, wiping them out, show me in history where the Israelites conquered the Hittites. Show me in history where the Israelites conquered any of these people. If the Israelites was going around and conquering all these people, they would have been written about. There would have been monuments. There would have been so many people talking about these badass Israelites going around conquering everything. But there's no mention Herodotus says nothing. Diodorus says nothing. Nobody says anything about these Israelites conquering the way the Bible is describing them, because it never happened. The people who was doing all the conquering was the Greeks and the Romans and the Persians and later the Arabs and Muslims. So now the Hebrew Israelites want you to accept that we are where we are at today because we broke God's law. We broke the covenant with God. Slavery happened. We are being oppressed to this day, all because we are being punished for breaking God's covenant, for breaking his law and disobeying God. But all the other races get to get a pass. They get a pass. Look at the Asians. Look at the white people. All the stuff that they have been doing for centuries. Nothing happened to them. They get to be rich and grow their economy, grow their people, and become successful. But black people, we got to endure this hell because we had supposedly broken this covenant. And got nothing to do with me today or you today. We ain't got nothing to do with our ancestors, what our ancestors did. But they want you to believe that it's going to be all right and that the Messiah is going to come back and he's going to take care of these white folks because they got to pay for what they did. So why do the white people living today have to pay for something that their ancestors did? They ain't had nothing to do with it. Just like we ain't have nothing to do with it. Does this sound like something that is correct to you? It doesn't even really make sense. The doctrine don't even sound good to me. So when these Hebrew Israelites, when they point to the pyramid on the back of the dollar and they say that, see, it represents Egypt. America is the new place of slavery. But they don't tell you that right around that crest, it says Mason. If you're going to accept that pyramid, you got to accept that it spells out Mason around it in that crest, because King James was a Mason. And that's what this thing really is about. That's why they're using the pyramid, because that's where they stole the knowledge from our people and created their empire that they have today. Our empire is crowned a success. That's what it's talking about on that dollar. Their empire has come to fruition. They have succeeded. King James was a Mason, period. Francis Bacon, the man who actually revised it or went over the Bible after it was written, he went and coded the whole thing, which is why it's saying what it's saying. So if you want to point to that dollar and that crest with the pyramid, you got to point to Mason. You also will have to point out the Freemasonry that surrounds Jesus Christ. You have to point out the fact that he died at 33, Masonic number. You have to point out that he traveled with 12 disciples. He would make 13, Masonic number. There's 13 steps going up that pyramid. It also corresponds with the zodiac. Jesus would be the sun. The 12 disciples would be the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, I went into this more, this whole Francis Bacon and King James thing in my video, Who Really Established America and what the Bible has to do with it. Check that video out. And also check out That's Game, the Bible and Christianity Finally Explained. It will tie everything together. This video and those two videos will just bring everything home for you. And you will just have a complete knowledge of this whole thing. And you will see clearly that this Hebrew Israelite doctrine is bullcrap. You will really understand that. Like I said, no way in the world they would let these people stand on the corner and scream at white people downtown if they didn't want this doctrine out. I mean, look at the times right now. Look at the times. We got white cops killing black people. We got this whole racial tension, going on in America. So this doctrine fits perfectly for people to start accepting this doctrine and saying, white people are this, white people are that, and your Hawashai's going to come back and destroy them all. Have you sitting there waiting, not doing nothing with your arms folded. You're going to die with your arms folded, looking at your watch. So pay attention to the times. Look at the times right now. You got white cops killing all these black people, shooting them dead in the street, innocent black people. Since when did the cops allow black people to stand on the corner? Since when did they allow that? Since when did they allow us to stand on the corner peacefully? We stand on the corner peacefully. You can't go in your own neighborhood today, you and 8 of your friends, and chill on the corner without the cops harassing you. But these Hebrew Israelites get to go downtown. They get to go into Times Square. They get to go into areas where white people frequent and spew hate and call them devils and tell them that they're going to hell and all kinds of stuff, screaming at white people. They get to stand up on a podium with a microphone and speakers, a bullhorn, and scream at white folks. Since when would they allow that to happen? This is part of an agenda, people. Wake up. Seriously. You don't think those rich white people who live downtown went and said something about this? You don't think they made their voice heard and said something? This is part of an agenda. It's just that simple. You can go ahead and cite freedom of speech and this and that. Well, why is it any different in our neighborhoods when we sitting there just talking, conversating? They ain't screaming at nobody. So now I just want to thank everybody who actually watched this video in its entirety. You know, I get so many questions from people who claim they watched the video already, and it's like, you know, if you actually watch the entire video, you wouldn't be asking me this question. So I know videos, you know, get long and I get long-winded. I'm not the most articulate person in the world. You know, I don't speak particularly well or better than anybody else. But, you know, this is just my research and I'm trying to get it out to people. I may be a little boring, maybe a little long-winded. It might not be very entertaining. But if you are a scholar, if you're trying to get information, I'm going to give you what I have and what I know. And I want to thank people who have, you know, stuck with me and follow, you know, this whole journey. Because really, I mean, when I started doing this thing, it was just to really give back to my study group, to people who I was really into this information with. Since I left the country, I wanted to still share information. I had no clue so many people would actually watch my videos. So I want to thank people who have, you know, stuck by me and defended me in the comment section. The comment section is war. You know, you see me, I don't mind commenting with people and debating with people in the comment section because, you know, I'm not trying to be some kind of, you know, internet celebrity or anything like that or famous from doing these videos. I don't ask for donations or anything like that. I mean, I have a donation thing on my page, yes, but I don't really promote it. I just promoted it just now, but, you know, I don't really promote it. But I'm just here trying to share information and just get people to wake up. You know, get people to wake up and see what's going on. This religion is separation. That's what it was designed for. These people at this top block where they use the pyramid, we're talking about the same people in the Bible that took over. We're talking about, well, I'm not going to say in the Bible, let's say in real life. We're talking about the Romans and Greeks, the Jews, the Muslims. They took over this whole thing. And they are together at this top block, seriously, because this is why you see videos of the Pope with the Islamic leader or with the Jewish leader, because they in this thing together. They in this whole thing. It's one big scam, seriously. They don't care if some Muslims here blow up some Christians there, long as they don't get hurt. So, big shout out to Allied Coalition Jump Off Commander. Big shout out to everybody who's been sharing the videos. I really owe the amount of views and the amount of subscribers to you guys because I haven't really been able to promote as much as I would like to because I basically, you know, been busy. I run my own company here and I'm trying to get it to become, you know, self-sustaining because I'm going to be headed back to America sometime this year to finish my PhD. So I wanted to get everything done here and out of the way so I can go back and knock it out and you know, and come back here and finish doing what I've been doing. So you might end up seeing me in Philly or on the West Coast, but definitely want to give a shout out to you guys. And I want to thank everybody for the support. And yes, I do have a book coming out sometime next year. It'll probably be in the spring. I've actually written about 6 books. This will be the first one to actually get published. Publishers ain't cheap, so you know, I've been working hard trying to get it done right. If I put out a book, I want the book to be right. I don't want it to be not corny. I don't want it to be thin. I don't want it to be boring. So, you know, I've really been putting a lot of work into putting my first book out and getting it out there. So it'll be out sometime next year for sure. But thanks everybody. Like, comment, share, and see you next video.